Today, I am talking about a question that I received on Instagram about podcast episodes and if there is a specific place that folks should be listening to them if we're considering SEO. So I'm excited to dive into this one. Let's go. Welcome to the Up in My Business podcast with me, Lex Lancaster, where you'll get an inside look at all things tech, business, and my life as a physical therapist turned digital operations expert. You'll hear all about my lessons as a business owner, the ins and outs of tech for your business, and more. From SEO, websites, and email marketing to automations, launches, and copywriting, I've got you. I'm so excited you're here. Let's dive in. As always, I need to tell you about the Up in My Business podcast sponsor, and that is Jane App. Jane is an all-in-one practice management software. The Jane team recognizes how hard you work to support your patients and clients, and they want to do the same thing for you. And that's why they offer unlimited phone, email, and live chat support with every single subscription. And it is truly one of the best features about Jane and why I love Jane so much and why I switched from other EMRs to Jane. So to get started with Jane, they recommend booking a personalized one-on-one demo with a member of their team. Of course, it's a great way to make sure that Jane will be a good fit for you and your practice and just to see Jane's features in action. And Jane even offers a free data import, an account setup consultation, and online training tools to set you up for success. And truly, it is one of the best onboarding processes that I've ever been through. I know there are hiccups that can happen, and Jane will always help you through those. So to get started, head over to jane.app/start, and their team would love to connect with you to see how Jane could help you in your practice. You can also use the code LEX1MO, so LEX1MO at checkout, and you will get a 1-month grace period applied to your new account. So if you've been looking for an EMR or if you want to try out Jane, head over to jane.app/start, use the code LEX1MO at the time for sign up, and you will get a 1-month grace period. Welcome back to another episode of Up in My Business, or welcome if this is your first time. My name is Lex Lancaster. If you don't know anything about me or if I am new to you, feel free to check out my website. I have most of my details there, and check out my Instagram. So I am very active on Instagram. Stories are typically life stuff and posts are usually business, tech, etc. stuff. So happy to have you here if you are new, and super excited to have anybody who is back for another episode here again. Thank you so much for listening. So I always start this podcast off with life updates, business updates, what you can expect from me, what's going on now, and let's jump in. So life updates. This past week was a great week. Got some more things settled in the house, which was amazing. And I had a creative, let's just call it creative drive, a creative push. I don't know what I want to call it, but I felt like I just wanted to do all the things in my business this past week. So I have had obviously a lot of big life changes. I've had a lot of moves. I mean, I think I've moved 4 times now in the last 6 months. I've had huge changes in my life. And it's been a long time since I have gotten, and this might come as a surprise to a lot of people, but it's been a long time since I have had the drive to sit down and create, whether it be updating old stuff, launching new things. It's just been, I don't want to say I haven't done it, but it's been more or less a struggle to do it, meaning I'm not liking it. That's a lot of nots. I like when I'm doing this stuff, but I have not had a push in my mind where like I have to sit down and do this today because I'm so like I have the brain power, I have the creativeness, I can feel it flowing, the juices are there. I haven't had that. And it's not for lack of like me not liking what I'm doing. It's not anything of the sort. It's more or less just my energy has been elsewhere for so long. So I would say this has been, probably more than a year, more than a year, really. If I sit down and think about it, it's been a while. The last time that I really sat down and created a lot of things was, let's see, it would have been early this year. So like end of 2022. And it still didn't feel like I had like creative juices just flowing out of me. Because if you've had that happen, if you are someone who is creative and you go through, waves of that creativeness, you know what that feels like. It's like, I have to capitalize on this right now or else it's going to go away. And I do think that there are people who have this all the time. And I am not jealous of them, but that is amazing. And I think that they should obviously embrace that if they already are amazing. If they're not, then, they know that it's coming back, or it might just be there, whenever they need it. For me, it's definitely a wave. It comes and then I might not feel that same energy for weeks or months, or, what I'm noticing is years or a year plus. So I will fully attribute it to the fact that my situation is it's just different in a sense of my energy is feeling good, just day-to-day stuff. And it's been a consistent, like, life is good, life is good, life is good for, probably 3 or 4 months now. And while I've been all over the place, obviously, with moving and changing and all the things, and also doing more activities, like doing more volleyball stuff, doing, hanging out with more people, because I've been doing all of that stuff and just feeling more fulfilled overall, it's almost like, and obviously if we think about the nervous system, like we always want to feel safe. So the more often and, higher chances of you feeling safe, you're going to then feel more comfortable letting go of the reins somewhere else. Or because you're feeling really good in a lot of places, you're going to have more ability to attack other areas of your life. So I felt like this past weekend, I had this energy that I had to capitalize on, and it felt so good. I wrote a to-do list on the big whiteboard that I have. Thank you to Shantae, because she got a new one. So I was like, I have been wanting to order this, and I am so happy that I have one now. So thank you. So on that big whiteboard, I had written a to-do list, and there were a decent amount of things on that list. I think I counted just now probably close to 12 or 13 things. I am one of the people, though, who will write down everything that I do, even if it's not on the list to begin with, so that I can cross it off. So if you're one of those people, I am you as well. I do not like to do something. If I have a big to-do list day and I'm like, I'm going to knock this stuff off my list, I will put everything on there. I don't like to do something off that list and not give myself credit for it. So I am that person. I get a dopamine hit when I cross shit off. I like it. So if you are that way, cool, me too. But anyway, I had a lot of stuff on that list, and it felt so good to get so many things done. So I know that I have talked about a couple things on the podcast that I was creating or ready to release, etc. And by the time that this launches, I should have the cart open for my brick and mortar templates for Canva. And in there, we're going to have a brochure. We'll have a service card. We'll have a Google review ask. We'll have a welcome packet for the clinic and the business card template. So I will have all of that stuff in a package for my clinicians who are in a brick and mortar practice. Now, I say brick and mortar, you could use this for an online business as well, but realistically, I don't know where you're going to be sending it. So anyway, but I would say mostly for brick and mortar practices. So I should have that cart open and ready to go on my website. I revamped and re-released my brand photography guide. I actually never formally released it. I only was sending it to people who paid for a do it in a day with me or got a Squarespace template from me. And now it's on my website, so anyone can purchase it. So I have re-released that. And then I also re-recorded and released my Canva course. So I had re-recorded, silly me. I had recorded the Canva course a couple times now, but this past one was a workshop that I did for Shantae's Instagram intensive early action takers for the people who registered early. And I had recorded it, and then the recording was the product. And there is nothing, there was nothing wrong with doing it that way, but what I wanted and what my brain had said, like, I want this to eventually be, is something on Kajabi, because I have Kajabi. I want to use that for all my online courses, etc. So I wanted to put it there. Well, for me, it was recorded in my old apartment. It was more or less a workshop rather than a course. And Canva has updated. So I said, you know what, I'm going to re-record it. I had told Shantae that back in July or June when she had asked about the early action takers, if we could do it as a bonus again. And, when she had asked, I said, I'm going to be re-recording it. And weekends went by, weeks went by. I just didn't feel the inspiration to re-record it. And like I said, this weekend it hit. So I relaunched that. That's on my website. So it's underneath courses. So you can find the brand photography guide, the Canva course, and then also the brick and mortar Canva templates on my website. And I'm so happy about it. I have been talking about the brick and mortar templates forever. And the resistance for me wasn't that I didn't want to do it. It's just like the time and the energy and no creative juices. So anyway, all of those things are on my website. So I will say, I'm going to back up and say this again because it's been kind of like 8 minutes of me saying I have creative juices flowing. So I'm not trying to, beat the horse dead here, but I will say that the environment that you're in is going to influence you. So put yourself in a situation day to day that you truly are happy in, that you feel really good in, and you will see the magic happen. I just cannot stress it enough. I can't stress the people in your life, the people who surround you. It is so important, and it lets you have freedom and success in other areas of life. And when you are finding, or if you ever find that something doesn't feel good, and then, that feeling is felt, if you will, over a long period of time, you will see it affect other pieces of your life. And you probably know this. We all know this, but I'm just echoing other people who have said it, and everyone who has ever felt it, that when you have a big change, when things get really good in 1 or 2 or 3 areas of your life, that fourth thing that was sitting there usually is not a struggle anymore. And for me, it felt like I had that creative block was destroyed this weekend. And I don't know who said it. I want to say there's some quote out there about how creativity, you need to be bored in order to be creative, like have nothing to do, like the best time. That's why I think a lot in the shower, because there's nothing to do in the shower. I'm not looking at my phone. I do the same thing in the car now, except now that I'm driving in California, I don't do it because there's a lot of cars here and I have to pay attention. But if I'm on a highway and I let my thoughts wander, what will usually happen is I will have business thoughts and I will, come up with ideas. And that's why I have a lot of voice notes in my phone of me just talking about ideas I have. So you need to get bored, and typically creative juices will flow. And for me, I don't think I'm bored, but I do think that my environment has been so stable for the last, 3 to 4 months that my body, my brain, my entire being is just allowing me to not have that heightened state all the time. So because it's relaxed and because I feel safe and because I just feel good, and it's stable, I'm able to take that energy and put it elsewhere. And this past weekend, that's what happened. So don't undervalue what your environment and all the things around you every single day are, contributing in other areas of your life. And yeah, that's really all I have. We all know that I'm not the storyteller. I'm not the person who's going to have this elaborate, amazing quote. It's not the strength of mine. I am a very, very tactical person. That's how I write my sales emails. That's how I run my business. I won't be telling you stories. I'm not good at that. So if you're looking for something that's quotable, you're probably not going to find it. But I will tell you that this is just, me speaking off the cuff. I don't have a script here. And yeah. All right. Now that we've gotten through the life inspirational stuff, I want to jump into business stuff really quick. I already told you a lot of the things because it had to do with, obviously, the creative juices flowing. So all of that stuff is there. Shantae and I are still finalizing details for our offer. We do have people on what we call a short list that we have touched base with, but we are trying to cover some logistical stuff around it that we have to figure out in order to make this thing run well. So we are still finalizing things. I know we've been saying that for a while, but the thing is if you know her and if you know myself, or I know myself, if you know me, you know that we need to have the details solidified in order to make it the best possible program for you. Because if we don't have those things solidified and we don't know exactly what's going to happen, we can't tell you what you can expect for results. And that's not fair to you. It's not fair to us. So we are making sure that we have everything solidified before we really, launch this thing, send emails out, do all the things. So we do have that program. It's still here. We are still trying to figure out the details. We're going to try to hash it out. I'm assuming this week. Obviously, Shantae is going through 2 different launches. So I'm thinking that in the next week or so, we should have more details. Don't quote me on that, but that should be the case. Which is perfect because we can get people to start before the new year. So with that being said, the other thing I want to bring up is SEO school. So SEO school will open at the end of October. I wrote the dates down. This is me turning my head. Hopefully you can still hear me well. The dates are waitlist will open on October 23rd to the 28th, and then regular registration will be November 1st to 5th. So if you're on the wait list, you do save $100, and that's it. So get on the wait list. If you want to be on the wait list, you're going to save $100. If you're what the program's about, because I leave the landing page up and you can see all the details there. I leave the price there. There might be some things that I change based on, the help that is being given, meaning like the coaching around it, the 6 months of calls, etc. But that's mostly correct on that sales page. And by mostly, I mean like 98%. So if you have any sort of interest of taking SEO school, I recommend getting on the wait list. And if you have taken SEO school and you have any sort of feedback for me, please let me know. I'd love to share it, and I'd love to hear your successes, because I have a couple people in my DMs the past couple weeks who have said, I am getting found for X, Y, and Z in my town, and I love to hear that type of stuff. So talking to you, my SEO people, if you are getting results with SEO, seeing results, please let me know. I would love to hear from you. So I believe that's really all I've got for you. I don't have a number in my head, but I know that I have less than 3 do it in a days left. So if you are someone who is looking for a new website or any sort of long list of tech to-dos, if you will, or maybe an SEO intensive, I have less than 3. I have less than 4. I think I might have 3 total. I can't remember what the calculation was. And I have not checked my email because there were a couple people who I had talked to last week, but I have less than 4 available this year. So if you're looking to get on my schedule for a do it in a day, I recommend jumping on that. I did share on Instagram that some people had no idea I do coaching calls. So if you need like gentle tech help or any sort of tech help, I said gentle. I'm not really sure why I use that word. Basically what I'm saying, if you don't need a website overhaul, we can meet for a coaching call. And coaching calls, I can do anything from pointing you in the right direction to the systems that you should be using, or helping you set something up on any sort of platform. There are places that I don't work on, but if you shoot me an email, book a discovery call, we can go from there. All right, let's get into the episode, because it's been 18 minutes, but this is tech, business, and life. I'm not trying to just come at you with only only tech stuff. And I do get a lot of DMs and some emails about the life stuff. So I don't want to just not talk about that, even though it is now 18 minutes. And this episode is really short because it's a good question. So I actually want to read. I'm going to pull up the exact question that was asked, because I do think that it was really, really good. So here we go. Lex, here's an idea for your podcast or post. Will you speak to why and how to link your podcast to everything? Link your podcast to everything, because people mostly listen to podcasts on their podcast apps. But I understand that for SEO, you'd want to link your podcast back to your website, the blog page. So if I want to link my podcast in my email signature, how do I make sure it's listenable for random iPhone users who are getting the email and get curious? So this is a good question, and it goes back to how we're going to set up a podcast in our website, and both things really. So there are different sections or different, let's silo this. So there is your podcast, so podcast player, wherever you host your podcast. Hopefully it's Buzzsprout, because they have the best statistics, and I really, really love that podcast host. Then you have your website, and then the podcast apps, which are obviously outside of those two things, but Buzzsprout will feed to the podcast apps, right? So if you have your website, I always recommend you're putting every single podcast episode on your website as a blog post with an insert, so an embedded player from your podcast host, so people can listen to it. So let me go into that again. I'm going to go through my podcast process to make it even easier. When I publish a podcast, it goes on Buzzsprout. That automatically sends it to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google Podcasts, whatever it may be. When you see my podcast on my website, so lexlancaster.com/podcast, I am doing that manually. So I take each podcast, put it on my website as a blog post. I know it's labeled a blog, but it's just a podcast, but it is just a blog insert on Squarespace. Put it on my website as a blog post, and then I go back to Buzzsprout and I say, embed this one episode. I'll click that link within Buzzsprout and I will take that and put it inside of a code block on Squarespace on each of the blog posts. So if I have episode 32, I am putting episode 32's insert in episode 32's blog post on my site. That's all manually done by me. And then I schedule it out. So when my podcast launches on the player, it automatically gets pushed to all the podcast players. And then when that same time rolls around, I have pre-scheduled my website to also publish that podcast episode. But if I didn't do that, it would still get published on the podcasting site. It's not like my website dictates anything. It's totally separate as far as tech goes. So with this question, for SEO, yes, I recommend having specific podcast episodes. If I email someone, or if I text someone, or if I put out an email marketing email to the masses, or if I talk about my podcast in my Instagram stories, I will always point people to the podcast episode on my website. Yes, because of SEO, but also because if I linked Apple Podcasts, some people are going to click that and not be able to play it because they don't have an Apple phone. I won't judge you, but also your texts are not blue, and I don't like texting people who don't have texts that are blue. Anyway, I'm just kidding. I'm just an Apple junkie. Like, I have Apple everything because it just goes back and forth between, like, all of my devices talk to each other, so I can do whatever I want, and it automatically goes to my computer from my phone, etc. But anyway, back to the topic. So when I link to my podcast at any point in time, I always link the podcast that is on my website. So if I were to say, hey, you should listen to episode 2 of my podcast, I will not link the Apple link or the Buzzsprout link or whatever. I will only link the podcast episode on my website. Okay, so that is getting people to listen to the podcast episode on my website. Amazing for SEO. I also still get the stats because Buzzsprout is amazing and it reads the stats that are in that podcast player, right? And sends them to my Buzzsprout statistics section. But that's how I do it. So whenever you are talking about your podcast to someone else and you're saying, hey, go check this out, always link the episode that's on your website. And that's why I say it's so important to do that and not just to put, because you can just put a podcast player on there and it has all your episodes and you can scroll through them all. But if you want to share a specific episode with someone, it's really hard to do if you don't have separate posts on your website. And that's great for SEO. So yes, always link the post that is on your website. Now, I also want to say, because if we really think about this, we would say, well, why would obviously don't do this, but people might want to know, well, then why would I push people to ever listen in a podcast player? Well, one, that's a user-friendly experience, right? So I listen to podcasts on Spotify typically. If I'm listening on Spotify and then you tell me that the only place I can listen to your podcast is on your website, that's going to be problematic for me. So of course, people are going to listen inside podcast players. How can we potentially also improve our SEO with our podcast if that's the case? Because a lot of people are going to be listening on players, not on your website. So how do we give ourselves, if you will, the best chance scenario for our SEO, or to have that SEO boost with our podcast? Well, what you do is you link to your website. So in the beginning of this episode, I told the new people here, if you haven't heard about me, go to my website. It's linked in my podcast notes. If you have a freebie, you would link to the freebie that's hosted on your website, because even if you have ConvertKit, I don't advocate for having a ConvertKit landing form. I advocate for having a ConvertKit embedded form on your website. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, A-okay, but people who listen will know. If you have a freebie, I don't recommend hosting that landing page just on ConvertKit. You're going to host it on your website and then point people to your website, and then they will be able to sign up for that freebie there because you're embedding it rather than linking to it. So anyway, that's how we're going to do things. So we're going to have links to our website in our show notes. Now, will every single person click on your website? No, but there is a reason why a lot of people, Amy Porterfield does it a lot, actually. She does a really good job of it. She will post in her show notes a link to a freebie that goes along with the podcast, and it'll be amyporterfield.com/whatever. And usually she does / the episode number, which that's a whole other topic to get into that I don't want to get into today, but there's a lot of things called URL mappings that we can talk about, but she does a lot of that for her podcast and does a really, really good job doing it. So you're going to link to things that are on your website when you're writing your show notes, and then mention them when you're talking in your episode. So all of that to say that we're not ever worried that people are not going to listen to our episode on our website, because realistically, you want them to listen to the episode. And if they listen on their phone, on their podcast apps, no sweat. The person who's going to reach out to you, the person who's going to go seek out your services and click on your website, they're going to do that in your show notes as well. So, excuse me, a lot of talking. So that question was really good, because if we talk about SEO, we want to say like, go to our website, go to our website, go to our website. But we also have to think about the user friendliness, and that's what it comes down to. So always when I'm sending an email out, if I'm referencing a podcast episode in an Instagram story, realistically, if I'm ever referencing a podcast episode, I'm going to link my podcast episode that I posted on my website, which is just, once again, go back and listen to how I do that, right? An embedded player from my host. If someone is listening to my podcast on Spotify or what have you, whatever player they like to use, inside my show notes, I'm going to have a link to my website for something, whether it's a wait list or it's a freebie that I have associated with the podcast episode. I will link to my website in the show notes, and then we can potentially affect the SEO there. Lastly, and this is huge, and I recognize that was just a really big spike. Lastly, the biggest thing that I have to tell you is that when you start measuring your SEO, your backlinks, so links that come from other places to your website, skyrocket with a podcast. So my backlinks are huge because of all the podcast players and the podcast episodes that I have. So with that being said, I don't really care, because everything that I'm posting, I don't care about, pushing my SEO type stuff and like worrying about people listening in a podcast player, because when I'm linking to my podcast, or when I'm linking to my website from my podcast show notes, I'm getting an SEO boost with that backlink anyway. So it's all working for me because backlinks are great. Google loves backlinks. So that's my last little thing. So make sure you're linking to your episode that you have on your website whenever you're talking about it, posting about it, whatever. Let people listen on their players, because the links inside your show notes are going to do SEO work for you. And then if people choose to click on your website, it's just another bonus. So that's all I have for you. It was a really great question. Really glad that it was asked. Thank you so much to the person who asked. And I loved covering it. If you have questions, please let me know. If you have more questions about that, if you have more questions about what you want me to cover, please let me know. Like I said, I told this person that I'd have to think about how I wanted to deliver this, because I think it's much easier to talk about it than it is to post about it. So that's why we're doing it here. But if you have a question, please let me know. I like to create content around things that people want. And yeah, that's all I've got for you. I am super excited. Have a busy week ahead. The sun looks like it's going to be out most of the week here. I'm having a really hard time telling time at this point, because if I was in New England or in New York, I would have like a big seasonal change right now. Some of the trees would be changing colors, etc. Not really having that in California. It's dark in the morning now, so that's helping me a little bit, but it's really hard to tell time here. So I'm hoping I get used to that. So we are, almost halfway through September, which is crazy to me. And I will be recording again next week, but I'm going to pre-record 2 episodes. So if you have ideas, please let me know. It's always great to answer your questions. All right, I'm going to wrap it up. Thank you so much for listening. I am really, really appreciative that you keep coming back, or if this is your first time, thank you so much for checking it out. I look forward to talking to you again next week. I will catch you then.